Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Ron Hunninghake. This is Dr. Ann Zauderer, and we're going to be talking about depression and anxiety today. How's everyone feel? All right. It's a bright, sunny day. So I think there are a few people that are finishing up with their plates, but I think we're going to go, in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so Dr. Ann, as you can see from the Health Hunter, did this article, and so I'm going to have her, she's the main presenter here. As I was thinking down there, she's the hot potato and I'm just the commentator. So I'm going to comment on things but and kind of help out, but I'd like to introduce Dr. Ann Zauderer as our main presenter.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Just out of curiosity, is anybody new to the Reardon Clinic? Anybody never been out here before? We've got a few hands. So, well, welcome to the Reardon Clinic. Today we're going to be talking about, the molecular basis of depression and anxiety. And, here in a sec, when we kind of jump into the lecture, this is a little bit more of what I would call a left brain lecture, a little bit more heavy on the science. So before we kind of jump into all of that, one thing I want to just comment on, before we get started is that depression and anxiety, kind of like with almost every physical ailment that we deal with, has a physical component to it, but also has, a spiritual, mental, emotional component to it as well. And so one thing I hopefully won't get lost in this lecture is the fact that, anytime we're dealing with depression and anxiety, there is absolutely an emotion behind that. And, part of healing from that is recognizing that emotion and, in kind of looking within and kind of understanding where that comes from. And rather than just jumping on medicating or supplementing some of those emotions away, really trying to understand kind of where that comes from. And so that being said, though, there is a whole other side to depression and anxiety that traditional medicine doesn't talk about a whole lot. When you go to your doctor and you express that you're feeling depressed or anxious, immediately, they jump to, well, I can give you an antidepressant, or, let's try this anti-anxiety med. And that is a quick fix. And for some people, that's a great bridge to help kind of bridge the gap between, the emotions they're experiencing, and the life, situations that they have. But it's not a long-term fix. It's not, long-term, these drugs were never designed to be used, over long periods of time. And so what we're seeing are a lot of side effects from these medications and an altering in brain chemistry, that affects us, for the long term. So nutrients and supplementation and what we're going to talk about today provides another option. And what we like to talk about is there's a whole gray area between severe mental illness and feeling well. And in that gray area where you feel a bit anxious or you feel a bit depressed, that's where this comes into play really well. So starting off, I always like to start with a few statistics. Hopefully this helps you feel like you're not alone if you are experiencing depression or anxiety. But 15 million Americans right now are depressed, diagnosed with depression. That doesn't count anybody that doesn't have the official diagnosis.
And that doesn't count the results of the election as well. So.
Yeah. 1 in 4 women is on an antidepressant medication. To me, that's really, really scary. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States. Anxiety affects 1 in 8 children, and 13% of children these days, ages 8 to 15, are being diagnosed with a mental disorder. So, so this is pervasive within our culture, and are we changing? Is the culture changing? And it's probably a bit of both, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So each of us, another kind of disclaimer, each of us is an individual. We are all biochemically individual. What works for one person, doesn't necessarily work for another. Anybody who's been on, an antidepressant that didn't work for you, understands that. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. And as you'll see here in a second, some of the biochemistry that we'll be talking about is very, very complex. And we all kind of have a unique set of genes that that affect that biochemistry. So we are all individual, and but this individuality is what makes us each unique and what makes us each special. And so so with nutrition, you can kind of start to tweak some of this biochemistry and help express the best version of yourself without actually changing your personality or changing who you are.
Another factor in this is that we're coming out of an era of medicine where we had hoped to reduce common maladies down to single causes. It's what's called reductionism. And depression and anxiety are basically symptoms. And we wanted to, I think standard medicine would like to make them into a diagnosis, a nice, neat diagnosis. But as we move forward, we're realizing that the ecology of the human being, the systems biology that we exist within, what we eat, the environment in which we live, the family that we grew up in, how we sleep, what's happening in our lives, all of these variables create a mosaic that sets us up for a depressive event or an anxious event that may throw us into a more chronic state of that symptom. But to think that we can take a single medicine and fix that without addressing the other root causes is probably overly optimistic and not realistic to how we as human beings actually function.
Absolutely. So we're going to give the punchline up front. What is the molecular basis of depression and anxiety? And really the statement should probably actually say what is a molecular basis. Again, there are many, many root causes, behind why people feel the way they do and how your brain functions. But what we're going to be emphasizing and focusing on today is a process in the body called methylation. Has anybody heard this term before? We've got a few people. So this is new to a lot of people in the room. And so hopefully, like I said, we're trying to distill this down. And at the end, we're going to leave lots of time for questions. But what we're going to be primarily talking about in the body is something called methylation. And methylation is a biochemical process that happens in every single cell in the body. So this cycle is turning 1,000,000 times a second in all the different cells, in your liver cells, in your skin cells, all the different cell types you have in the body. Almost every single cell methylates. And so essentially, if you get down to kind of a chemical level or biochemical level, what methylation is you're taking a CH3 group or a methyl group and you're transferring that around from product to product. And as you transfer that around, that turns what we call a cycle. And the best way to kind of think about this is if you think about the methylation cycle kind of like a gear, a gear on a bicycle that's turning. That gear should be turning at a nice, comfortable rate. And there are other gears that fit into that gear. So how fast that gear's turning affects the other gears. So it's all kind of one big system. And if everything is turning nicely and and you're moving along, everything's flowing, you're great. But if that gear starts speeding up and it starts going too fast, all the other gears start speeding up with it. Or if that gear starts slowing down, then all the other gears start slowing down with it. And if some of this happens too quickly, you can even jam those gears up. And so what this looks like, here's the biochemistry I promised you. So don't panic. We're not going to go into this in any detail. But just to show you, this is methylation right here. So that's your methylation gear. And the gears that fit into methylation are gears that deal with detoxification, so how our body eliminates toxins. This is the folate reduction pathway. Has anybody heard of MTHFR? So a few hands. Okay, so folate, this is how the body processes folate. What we're interested in today is our neurotransmitter production. So that gear fits into this system. And then also our stress hormones, how our body produces and utilizes and eliminates stress hormones. So this whole system kind of fits in together, and how methylation is turning. Methylation is kind of at the center of this, and how methylation is functioning affects how all of these other pathways are functioning as well. Any thoughts?
Just wanted to say, and we'll have questions at the end if that's okay. Just wanted to say that this process, even though it sounds strange and new maybe to some of you, really the Reardon Clinic started on this basis. Dr. Riordan was a student of Dr. Carl Pfeiffer, who was one of the original biochemical psychiatrists. And there was a concern as we moved into the medication era of using psychotropic medicines to treat schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, that maybe that was an oversimplification, but that just treating the symptom was not enough, that we needed to look at the biochemical basis. And so Dr. Pfeiffer discovered something called histamine, and people were they either had too much histamine or too little histamine, and he developed a whole system of diagnosing schizophrenia based upon your histamine status. And so that later evolved into the understanding that if you had high histamine, you were undermethylated, and if you had low histamine, you were overmethylated. So really, methylation was I guess you would say, the concept that Dr. Riordan started this Reardon Clinic with. And now we're taking it now to a more evolved state of understanding based upon the new study of epigenetics, which Dr. Ann will get into shortly.
So when we talk about methylation, when we talk about somebody being undermethylated, that essentially means that this process is moving too slow. That gear is turning too slow in the body. And when you're overmethylated, that's when that gear starts turning too fast. So this is kind of like the Goldilocks, complex. Too hot, too cold, and just right. So where we all want to be is kind of in that just right, where our methylation is functioning optimally, but not too fast, not too slow. And this, you can kind of think of it kind of like a continuum. What we'll discuss are symptoms related to being undermethylated versus overmethylated. It's kind of a continuum that all of us are kind of shifting along that continuum. And you'll find times in your life where you might feel more undermethylated, and then for some of our patients, they start treating that, and then they shift into an overmethylated state. So you can kind of switch in between, and ideally we want to kind of find that sweet spot in the middle where everything is kind of functioning optimally. So what we're going to be talking about a lot is methylation in relation to our neurotransmitters. And so just as kind of a quick little review, for those who aren't familiar, our neurotransmitters are the chemicals in our brain that help our brain function. We have certain ones that make us feel good. We have certain ones that excite things in the brain. We have certain ones that inhibit other processes in the brain. But three of the main ones that we're going to be talking about are serotonin, which serotonin is the neurotransmitter that most antidepressant drugs target. SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs. Those help keep serotonin in the synapse longer so that it can exert its effect and you feel better. Dopamine is related, again, a feel-good neurotransmitter related to pleasure and reward in the brain. Norepinephrine, this is one of our adrenaline hormones. So norepinephrine and epinephrine are what are released when we get into a stressful situation. So these are necessary neurotransmitters because they help kind of bring the body, to action. It's kind of a call to action, and we absolutely need these in limited quantities. But what we're going to talk about is how methylation affects the production of all of these neurotransmitters, as well as the clearance of some of these neurotransmitters. Because a little bit of norepinephrine is good, but if that norepinephrine sticks around a lot longer than it should, you're going to create an environment in the body where you're stressed, anxious, and your body, can't process, that stress and anxiety. Do you want to talk about these?
Well, this is going back to just basic medical school stuff, because we know that the neurotransmitters have to be made from something, and what they're made from is amino acids. And so in the serotonin pathway, I'm sure many of you have heard of tryptophan, or 5-HTP. And when you methylate tryptophan, you basically convert it to serotonin. And when you methylate serotonin, you convert it to melatonin. But keep in mind that there are cofactors. There are nutrient cofactors that are necessary to facilitate these transitions.
So we've put on here, these are just a few. You've got your B vitamins, which you'll see over and over again, and then the other ones we'll be seeing are a lot of our minerals like magnesium and zinc. These are all important cofactors for these reactions. And so this is how the body produces serotonin. Production of dopamine starts with the amino acid tyrosine, and it eventually gets turned into that norepinephrine, that stress hormone. But as you can see, there are important nutrient cofactors for that. Production of norepinephrine and epinephrine, again, what you'll see is some of these steps is methylation is required, for some of these steps to make these neurotransmitters. And so methylation is what we would call a rate limiting factor. So how your methylation is turning, again, it's going to affect how your body is able to produce, utilize, and eliminate these neurotransmitters. So what we want to talk about is, what does it look like if you are undermethylated or overmethylated? And so what we have here, this is a compilation of different subtypes of depression, and these were put together by a researcher named Dr. William Walsh, and he studied under Carl Pfeiffer at the Pfeiffer Institute. And from their database of over 30 years seeing thousands of cases of mental illness, these are the statistics of what they found, each of these subtypes, the prevalence of each of these subtypes and these different types of depression. So what we'll talk about is undermethylated depression. What does that look like? Overmethylated depression, because that looks very different. It has a different set of symptoms. Elevated copper depression. What does that look like? Urinary Pyrrol depression, and then toxic overload depression. So when we look at what are the traits of somebody who's undermethylated or undermethylated depression, what we're looking at is these are the people that respond really well to SSRIs, the antidepressant drugs. These people are going to do really well, at least initially, on these drugs. These are the people that if they take B vitamins, if you've ever known somebody that has an adverse reaction to B vitamins, it just shoots them into orbit. Most often it's your undermethylated person, because these people have an adverse reaction to folic acid. Obsessive compulsive tendencies. Anybody who's been diagnosed with OCD or even just having some obsessive compulsive tendencies, that's a trait of undermethylated. Self-motivated. Undermethylated people tend to be your CEOs. They tend to be highly competitive, very self-motivated. They tend to do really well in academics because they push themselves really hard, but they struggle with that internal stress, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So they tend to be very high achieving and very self-motivated, but on the inside there's a lot of inner tension. These are the people that Dr. Ron talked about have high histamine levels. Histamine is what gets released when we have an allergic reaction. So watery eyes, watery nose, itching, all of those are symptoms of high histamine. And so these people, when they take an antihistamine, tend to feel really good. And they report not only some of their allergic symptoms, abate, but they also feel better. Their mood feels better.
You need the methylation pathways to detoxify histamine. And so if you're undermethylated, you don't have adequate pathways to get rid of the histamine, so it builds up in your body.
Low tolerance for pain. So these people tend to have a low tolerance for pain, and this is related to dopamine levels. They tend to have lower dopamine levels, and so so they tend to have a lower tolerance for pain. Personality, they tend to be very strong-willed individuals. High suicidal tendency, they tend to have sparse hair. So if you have sparse hair on your arms or legs or chest, that's related to undermethylation. They tend to deny that they're depressed. They either deny it or suppress it. They don't kind of address that emotion. Like I mentioned, high accomplishment, and they tend to ruminate or perseverate, so they can't stop thinking about events that have happened in the past or conversations that they've had or something that somebody said to them. They tend to dwell on that a lot. More symptoms. These are continued symptoms of undermethylated. These people tend to do really well on the supplement called SAMe. SAMe or methionine. These are both, beginning steps. These are beginning amino acids in the methylation cycle. So if somebody's ever taken, SAMe and they feel really, really great, most likely they're undermethylated. I mentioned high inner tension, perfectionism, allergies, high libido, high fluidity, the tears, saliva, these sweating a lot, these tend to be undermethylated. Very competitive. I think our whole family is undermethylated.
Yeah, well, I was going to say doctors and the Hunninghakes are all very undermethylated.
They tend toward addictive behaviors, so alcohol addiction or drug addiction. So that's a much greater prevalence.
And keep in mind that no one's going to fit this perfectly. And if you're thinking, oh, I'm definitely undermethylated, wait till you see the overmethylated, and you'll see some of those characteristics as well. Because as Ann said earlier, you can shift back and forth. You can shift from an undermethylated state into a higher methylated state and suddenly have those symptoms. So it's not so much you're stuck in that state. It depends upon what's happening to your methylation metabolism.
These people tend to have a calm demeanor, so they're calm on the outside but anxious on the inside. Frequent headaches, non-compliance with therapies, and oppositional defiance as a child. So these, like Dr. Run said, these are all qualities. And what you'll find as we go through the next list of overmethylated depression, you'll kind of resonate either with yourself or you'll be able to identify for your spouse, which one they are, but we all kind of, shift back and forth between these.
And my personal opinion is our society as a whole is drifting towards undermethylation for the simple reason that we have a lot more toxicity in our environment, and a lot of the methylation is now being shifted towards helping the body detoxify, so there's less methylation left over to balance the brain chemistry.
So overmethylated depression. So these are this is also called low folate depression. So these are the people that do really, really great on folic acid, high dose folic acid. And one thing that's interesting, the field of psychiatry and psychology, they are up on all of this stuff. I have more patients that see a psychologist that have come in testing some of this stuff, and they're aware of all of this because they're aware of how much this affects the brain. But I have also had a few patients that have come in where their psychologist or psychiatrist has put them on really, really high doses of folic acid because they associate that with depression, and these people shoot through the roof because they were more undermethylated, and so so for that subset of the population, the folic acid is going to make them worse. But for people who are overmethylated, folic acid is going to be their best friend, and they're going to feel really, really great on it. These are the people that have an adverse reaction to SSRIs. These are the people that go off the deep end, that get suicidal, that start shooting up schools. Great example of somebody that is suspected to be or was suspected to be overmethylated is Robin Williams. They reported in the media that they had switched him to a different antidepressant, and it was within the matter of a few weeks that he committed suicide. And so when you start seeing some of these symptoms of overmethylation, it fits him to a T. These are people that are real sensitive to foods and chemicals. These people tend to have dry eyes and mouth. They tend to be more low histamine, on the low scale of histamine. These are very artistic, kind of high ability right brain sort of people. They have more kind of a nervous energy about them. They pace a lot. Non-competitive. These people could care less, about sports. They tend to, as a child, tend toward more of the hyperactivity. They have a lot of pain, upper body specifically, neck and head pain. Estrogen intolerance, so women who can't handle birth control pills, or women who can't handle, taking hormones, have this estrogen intolerance. So these high anxiety, again, going back to, these are the people that their methylation cycle is turning too fast. They tend to have improvement after benzodiazepines, so that helps kind of calm them down. Absence of seasonal allergies because their histamine levels are low. These people tend to have a low libido. So abnormal patterns of hair growth, sleep disorder, underachievement in school. Even though they might have a normal intelligence, they tend to be kind of underperformers in school. They have a very high pain threshold. Adverse reaction to SAMe and methionine. So SAMe and methionine, again, are what feed the methyl cycle. They're substrates of the methylation cycle. And so, giving people these supplements, they tend to get a lot worse. It's almost like giving them an SSRI. And then copper intolerance. So then, so those are your overmethylated depression. So the third subtype that we're going to talk about, these are the elevated copper depressants. So these are people that come in with an elevated copper. And just as a side note, Dr. William Walsh talks about in the majority of postpartum depression cases that he saw, that was due to an elevated copper in women. And so, so it was their zinc levels dropping suddenly after delivering the baby, that zinc and copper work as kind of a teeter-totter. And so when their zinc levels dropped, their copper levels increased. And so, he said the majority of postpartum depression cases he saw were actually elevated copper. So, but you can have elevated copper, at other times, and that can, create depression in the brain. And one of the mechanisms of this is copper is one of the cofactors that helps us convert our dopamine into norepinephrine. And so when copper levels are too high, you're over-facilitating, you're changing that dopamine into norepinephrine. So not only do you not have the feel-good dopamine, but you've got more of that norepinephrine, more of that high-stress, high-anxiety sort of neurotransmitter, and so that kind of sets the stage for these.
How many of you know of an ADHD child? Okay, that's this. They have high copper, they tend to be going, and they're really pretty nervous, but they can also be depressed at the same time and have trouble paying attention. And so that's very often we see a very high copper and a low zinc. And so this will kind of start to think about people in a different way. We have a tendency to give diagnostic labels, and that's fine, but what's the root causes? What's going on in the body, in the cells that's giving rise to the diagnosis? That, to me, is a more useful way of thinking, because then we start to correct those root causes and we can bring about long-term improvements in their health. Whereas just treating a diagnosis with a drug that suppresses a symptom, you can get a short-term response, but you may not get that long-term correction, and it prevents us from continuing to think about what does this individual really need to help their bodies function more normally.
So your high copper depression, majority are women. So, the majority of this subtype are going to be women. Like I mentioned, first episode can be after puberty. Puberty, you have, a huge growth. You utilize a lot of minerals. You utilize a lot of zinc. So that can, cause those zinc copper levels to get out of balance. Childbirth or menopause, so these tend to be, prime times in a woman's life when things are shifting and those minerals can get out of balance. Severe anxiety, sleep disorder. These people have a hard time sleeping. Hormone imbalances, hyperactivity in childhood, as Dr. Ron mentioned. Skin sensitivities, so if you have a sensitivity to certain fabrics or certain metals, certain metals on your skin, you can't wear certain jewelry, that could be, an imbalance in these minerals and leading to a high copper. Tinnitus, so ringing in the ear, and then intolerance to estrogen, shellfish, and chocolate. So, so if you know a woman that doesn't like chocolate, beware, because that's not normal.
The other way to kind of think about this, going back to Dr. Riordan, he was a psychiatrist and he worked a lot with schizophrenics. There's two extremes of schizophrenia. There's the paranoid schizophrenic, and then there's the catatonic. So the paranoid is very hyper and hallucinating and very anxious, and then the catatonic is just sitting over in the corner, can't hardly move. Those are really the extremes of overmethylation, the paranoid, and the undermethylation, the catatonic. So depression and anxiety is probably lesser degrees of this, but if it gets really, really extreme, then it can go into the schizophrenias.
So the fourth subtype of depression we're going to talk about is related to something called urinary pyrroles. And urinary pyrroles are something that can be measured in the urine. You know, this tends to be something that we pass on in families where there are certain people that just produce more pyrroles in the body. And when you produce more pyrroles still steal zinc and B6 from the body. And so to be able to eliminate those pyrroles, that's going to deplete those two nutrients, you know, more readily than, say, other people. And just as kind of a side note, we are one of the few labs here at the BioCenter Laboratory that run a urinary pyrrole measure. And, you know, there are labs from, you know, all over the country that send their urinary pyrroles to us to measure, because we are one of the few labs that actually measure this. But if you are somebody that tends to run high pyrrole, you know, this is something I actually, you know, not that you ever would wish this on somebody, but when people come in with high pyrroles, I love it because it's very, very easy to treat. You start giving somebody zinc and B6 and their whole world changes. And I speak as a high pyrrole person myself. You know, but urinary pyrroles, when these get off, can create a lot of issues in the body. So some symptoms of that. This is a stress disorder. You know, again, this kind of anecdotally, I find this very often runs with undermethylation, you know, because zinc and B6 are also so important with the methylation cycle. You know, the people that I tend to see that have the urinary pyrrole disorder, they tend to tinge more toward the undermethylated state. But this is a stress disorder, so a lot of internal stress. Onset of depression that's triggered by a severe emotional or physical trauma, PTSD. You know, that can be, you know, for somebody who has this urinary pyrrole disorder, that can trigger the production of more pyrroles and the depletion of those nutrients. Severe mood swings, you know, so even, you know, Dr. Walsh talks about people who cycle, you know, bipolar cycle within one day. Extreme mood swings tend to be, you know, have the high pyrroles. Inability to cope with stress, rage, you know, so they have a lot of, you know, anxiety and rage. Absence of dream recall. You know, you need vitamin B6 to help recall your dreams. And so if you have this urinary pyrrole disorder and you're depleting your B6, you're not going to be recalling your dreams in the morning. These people tend to sunburn easily. They don't tan very well. You know, this is very apparent when I see children that come in that have high pyrroles. They're very pale skinned, and and they don't do well in the sun. There tends to be morning nausea. These are people that don't like to eat breakfast in the morning. They like to skip breakfast. Sensitivity to bright lights and loud noises. And then the appearance of them, they tend to have more slender wrists, slender ankles, and a slender neck, and the fat distribution tends to be more kind of in the midsection and in the thighs for people with urinary pyrrole. And again, we tend to see this run in families. That there's some genetic piece that connects this, but we tend to see this run in families quite often. A few other symptoms of the urinary pyrrole depression: disturbed menstrual cycle or complete absence of a menstrual cycle, delayed puberty, or this is somebody that, you know, after they hit, you know, maybe 15, 16, 17, all of a sudden they go through a huge growth spurt. It's a classic sign in kids. Inner tension, you know, so that kind of that inner stress, that inner anxiety. Reading disorders and academic underachievement, you know, tend to run in this group. They tend to be very fearful and pessimistic, have a kind of a pessimistic view on the world. They isolate themselves. Like I mentioned, the rapid cycling bipolar. And these people are obsessed with disasters, you know, so it's always, again, that pessimistic worst case scenario sort of situation. They live in a world of fear.
And so just also to kind of tie this in with low zinc, a lot of times when you eat a high refined carbohydrate diet, you tend to deplete zinc. There's not a lot of zinc in white sugar, white flour, refined foods. And so part of this is a biochemical tendency to excrete zinc and B6 more rapidly. But then our modern food environment unfortunately makes this worse because the refined standard American diet very often is very zinc deficient. So these people, they get into that whole category of eating, and they're very addictive as well. They can get addicted to sugar, and that just intensifies the zinc deficiency, especially in kids that are ADHD.
So what disturbs methylation? We've kind of talked about this methylation cycle kind of getting, going too fast, going too slow, and how that can affect us. But what is it that is affecting the methylation cycle? What is it that's creating that gear to slow down or speed up? And so this is where we could probably do a lecture on each one of these things individually and talk for 2 hours on them. So we're going to kind of run through these a little bit quickly, but just so that you know, these are the main things that affect methylation. So as we've talked about, a lack of cofactors. So cofactors are nutrients and minerals that help make this biochemistry run. So if you are missing certain key nutrients, this biochemistry isn't going to work as efficiently. And so a lack of some of those cofactors is the biggest reason we see why people's methylation is off. You can have certain genetic mutations. How many people have heard of the term epigenetics? A few. So epigenetics is a new field of genetic study where they're looking at not just what affects our DNA, but what's affecting the translation of our DNA. And what they're finding is our DNA is much more adaptable than we thought it was. And this has been a huge advantage to us because, if there is an environmental shift or an environmental change that happens, it's to our benefit to be able to quickly adapt to what's going on in our environment. And so what they found is there are a lot of factors that influence not our DNA, not the hard wiring of the code of our DNA, but rather the translation of that DNA. So the DNA could be intact, but you have certain proteins that are maybe translating that DNA a little bit differently. And that translation, what that affects is enzymes. And so when our enzymes slow down, our biochemistry slows down. So this is one of the coolest things that's kind of come out within the last 5 years is we can now measure these epigenetic mutations that are happening. There's a saliva test, 23andMe, that you can send off for yourself. You don't even need a doctor to order it for you, and you can take a look at over 200 different, well, I mean more than that, but 200 that are related to nutrition that we know about, enzyme mutations that could be affecting your methylation. But other things that disturb methylation are medications. There's certain medications that deplete these nutrients that help the methylation cycle turn. So if you're on certain medications, that's going to make it harder for you to balance your methylation. There's certain nutrients that deplete methyl groups. So there's certain nutrients like niacin. Dr. Ron mentioned that Dr. Riordan used to treat schizophrenics, and people who were in an over-methylated, sort of schizophrenic state, they would treat with high doses of niacin. And part of the reason that worked is that would help kind of drain some of that methylation and slow down so that that gear so that they weren't turning too fast. Certain environmental toxicity, can have an impact on methylation. Certain proteins like, homocysteine, that when that gets out of balance, that can affect methylation. And then the lack of certain methyl donors, which that, again, goes back to certain nutrients, that are like methylfolate is a methyl donor, into the methyl cycle. So just to kind of give a big shot view of this, this goes back to our biochemistry. There's our methylation cycle. Just to show you how important nutrients are, these are all the places where some of these nutrients have an effect. So we've got magnesium. So magnesium has an impact on all these different steps. And this is just a sample of our biochemistry. So
Dr. Carol and Dean, who's kind of one of the primary proponents of the importance of magnesium, has said that they now know of over 800 enzymes in the body that use magnesium as a cofactor. So it's extremely important in not only mental health, but physical health as well.
And this is the reason why I am very skeptical, and you should be very skeptical of any research study that tries to isolate the effects of magnesium on X. Well, magnesium might affect X, but it also affects hundreds and thousands of other different things in the body. So this is the reason why, unlike drugs, where you can measure the effects of drugs on specific things, it's very, very difficult to isolate certain nutrients and the effects of certain nutrients because they affect so many different things.
Most of your medications target specific enzymes, so you're trying to block certain enzymes in order to have certain effects, like the SSRIs block the serotonin reuptake. And that's good to an extent, but there are long-term consequences. Whereas nutrient therapy, you're not only helping certain specific enzymes, but you're helping the body as a whole. So this is this systems biology. You're dealing with the whole ecology of the body as opposed to attacking one or two specific areas.
So magnesium, these are all the places magnesium has an effect. There's zinc, B6 all over the place, B2, B1, B3, there's copper, B12. So you can kind of start to paint the picture why nutrients are so important and why getting these nutrients in your diet especially is so important. And here at the Reardon Clinic, we do something called the methylation lab panel, and it measures all of these different nutrients. So this gives us a good idea of what methylation looks like just based on what your nutritional reserves look like.
And really this came about because Olive Garvey, who some of you know was a very important philanthropist here in Wichita, she took her kids in to the doctor because she had read a book on nutrition and mental illness and said, I would like for you to measure some of these nutrient levels. And the doctor didn't know how to do it. He didn't have a resource. He didn't have the background training. So she knew that a nutrient-based laboratory was something that should be available in the state of Kansas. And so because she couldn't get anyone to do it, she ran into Dr. Riordan, who at that same time was working with Dr. Pfeiffer, and began to realize that these nutrients, even though they're common everyday kind of nutrients that you find in multivitamins, but they're in very small amounts. And what we have discovered here at the Reardon Clinic is that the dose is highly dependent upon the individual biochemistry, their diet, their genetic tendencies, their toxicities. There are so many variables that can affect what dose is needed for the individual. So the work we do is learning how, with our patients as co-learners, to go ahead and get these nutrients balanced properly in that specific individual.
The other big factor that was number 2 on the list are genetic mutations. And I just highlighted a few genetic mutations, but on this biochemistry chart, anywhere you see a little bubble, those are enzymes. And anywhere you have an enzyme, those are the areas that you have the potential to have some of those epigenetic changes. You could have certain translation errors that affect how these enzymes are built. And if they're not built correctly, then that can affect how that biochemistry works and functions. And so, if you're following along, probably one of the biggest one that's kind of that had the most, press lately is one called MTHFR. I say it looks like a curse word without the vowels, but MTHFR right there. If you want to Google, look up MTHFR. There's a lot of great information out there, a lot of, emerging, research surrounding that one particular enzyme. And so that's a good place to start when you start looking into some of these genetic mutations. Now, I also wanted to just kind of throw this in there. This isn't the topic of our lecture today, but these are all the other conditions that are related to methylation disorders. So if your methylation is out of balance, yes, you could be depressed, yes, you could be anxious, but very often we find most of our patients come in with a lot of other comorbidities, a lot of other conditions or symptoms that they're dealing with. And so this is just another list of other symptoms that can be related to methylation.
And this is why why we handed this out to you. On one side is the methylation system, but if you flip it over, this tells you the consequences, disease-wise, of not having these methylation factors in balance. So this is really the beginning of a big new trend in medicine to look at how epigenetics is giving rise to many of the mystery chronic illnesses that we're seeing grow and grow in our society, such as chronic infections, cancer, mental illness, autoimmune diseases, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. A lot of these things, the answers to that are going to be found probably in our understanding of methylation and how to correct it in each individual.
And I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. If we have your email address, we'll email out this presentation to you. So you'll have all of this information. So where do I start? You know, it's kind of an overwhelming topic, and you know, we always recommend to proceed with caution. You know, when dealing with methylation, we have both experienced with patients, with our own selves. You know, if you know, a little bit's good, too much might not be, you know, a good thing, you know. So you want to proceed slowly, because if you're undermethylated and you start turning that cycle too fast, you're going to jam up your gears and you're going to, you know, experience either a worsening of symptoms or new symptoms. And so, you know, so we always say, you know, go slow as far as when you start supplementing with certain nutrients. However, there are a lot of things surrounding methylation that you can do, because, you know, one of the things that has an impact on methylation is all of the kind of ancillary environmental things that we do. You know, so when we're not sleeping well, or when we're not eating well, or we're not exercising, all of those things are going to put more stress on those biochemical pathways. So one of the best places to start is start addressing all of this stuff. And a lot of people can alleviate or at least lessen some of their symptoms just by addressing some of these lifestyle things. Now, there are a subset of the population that we would recommend working with a provider who knows about this stuff, you know, to help when you start, you know, going into supplementing, and, you know, when you start working on actually, you know, changing your methylation status. But, you know, as Dr. Ron mentioned, a poor diet equals a poor nutritional status. You know, so if you're not eating well, if you're not eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of colors, you know, then you're not going to be getting the nutrients that your body needs to support methylation. And if you want one thing to eat, that's probably one of the best ways to support methylation: spinach. Start adding spinach and leafy greens to your diet as much and as often as you can. You know, the you know, environment of the gut, the microbiome, leaky gut, digestive enzymes, all of those are going to have an impact on methylation. Reduce environmental toxicity. You know, so if you're not eliminating, or if you're not able to eliminate toxins, or if you're exposed to chemicals in the environment, in the foods you're eating or in the water you're drinking, that's going to put more stress on your methylation. Use medication with caution. This is a more complete list of the different medications that can have an impact on methylation, and is specifically these drugs are going to be depleting nutrients that are important for methylation. Limit alcohol. So alcohol shuts down methylation. You know, so so you want to limit your alcohol usage. Also, a byproduct of alcohol is acetaldehyde, and that can also be a potent neurotoxin, and that, to eliminate that chemical, puts more stress on methylation. Manage oxidative stress. You know, so oxidative stress in the body is what antioxidants counter. So we want to, again, goes back to eating a lot of colors, a lot of fruits and vegetables. A lot of antioxidants are going to kind of help squelch the fires of oxidative stress in the body. If you're undermethylated, avoid nutrients that steal methyl groups. So like I mentioned, the niacin was great for people who were overmethylated and they were turning too fast. But if you are undermethylated and you start taking high doses of, say, niacin, you're just going to continue to deplete your methyl groups, and you're going to create an even worse, undermethylated situation in the body.
But that second point up there is very interesting. If you are beginning to work with methylation and you think, gee, I think I would benefit from folic acid, or a lot of the doctors are prescribing Medinex and other high folic acid supplements, and you suddenly feel really bad, a small amount of niacin will kind of like bring you down from that. It's very interesting.
A bad folate trip. Address heavy metal toxicity. Heavy metals, again, are going to put more stress on the body, more stress on the detox systems. And, if you remember, detox was one of those gears that fits into methylation. So if your body is working really, really hard to detoxify, that's going to affect methylation and put more stress on methylation. Reduce stress. easier said than done. But stress depletes key nutrients, specifically nutrients that are needed for methylation. So the more stress we're under, and not even just our lifestyle stress, but the food stress, like Dr. Ron mentioned, eating refined carbohydrates, eating a lot of refined sugar creates stress in the body. So that's all going to deplete some of these key nutrients and put kind of more of a demand on the overall system. And then know your status. We like to be as objective as possible. So you really don't know if you're over or under methylated unless you test for it. And so these are two great tools that we utilize. The 23andMe testing, which is the genetic test. I always say the 23andMe gives you the map, whereas your methylation lab panel tells you the traffic patterns. So on a map, there are certain areas in the body where you could have 6 lanes of traffic versus other areas where there's only 2 lanes of traffic. But 2 lanes of traffic might not be a big deal if there's not very much traffic on the road to begin with. So you really want to look at both perspectives. You want to see, what is the traffic patterns, where am I susceptible genetically, for getting stuck. And then you also want to know what the traffic patterns look like, and that's looking at the actual nutrients, that create the traffic on the roads. All right, these are just 2 reference informations. If you're interested, this book, Nutrient Power by Dr. William Walsh, is an excellent resource. He's the one, he and Dr. Carl Pfeiffer have done a lot of research in this area, and so we're piggybacking a lot on, the work that they've done over the past 30 years, and this is just an incredible resource. It goes through depression, ADHD, schizophrenia, all the different conditions and all the different things that can be associated with it. So, and then Dr. Ben Lynch, he's a naturopath out of Washington that's done a lot of research in the field of methylation, and so he's got a lot of great resources on his website to kind of look further into this topic. So, and that's all we have. So we'll open it up for questions, and
I'll just go ahead, if you could just say your question. I would like for you to go back to the first slide with the gears.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a misconception there. The methyl gear is meshed with only one other gear. And is that the way it's intended, or should it be meshed with all through the system?
It's all through the system because, with the gears, all the gears interface. Let me go back to it here. And so even though it might not directly interface with some of them, the speed of methylation is going to affect some of those. And it gets kind of complicated. The gears are a bit of an oversimplification of it.
The gears are an analogy. Probably a beehive would be a better way of thinking of it, that in your cells, all of these nutrients are just buzzing around in the cytoplasm of your cells. And this is just is what they've used, this is what the biochemists have developed in terms of helping us understand where the different nutrients go. But as far as them being actual gears, I would not say that they are truly gears. That's a mechanical way of thinking of it, but it's more of a systemic effect going on inside of your cells, every cell.
If you want to look, my thing keeps shutting off here. But if you look, when we email out these notes, anywhere you see SAM, S-adenylmethionine. So SAM is, I don't know why this keeps jumping around on me.
You can look on the...
If you look at anywhere you see the SAM, or on Dr. Ron's, anywhere you see the SAM, that's where methylation kind of interfaces. So you've got, SAM, down here, affecting the stress hormones, it's up here. So the gears is just kind of an analogy, and it's an oversimplification, because in the body, it's not a perfect circle, it's all kind of all over the place. But the analogy is that how one system is working is going to affect all of these other systems, and if you don't have the substrates to make this system work, you're not going to have substrates to make these other systems work as well.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
What was the definition of epigenetics? Do you have a definition?
So epi means kind of above, so epigenetics are all the different factors that affect genetics, that affect the expression of our genetics, of our DNA. And so, so it's all of the different proteins. You have different proteins that affect, kind of how fast or how slow your DNA is translated, and those are more of kind of the epigenetic. And those proteins are highly influenced by the environment. So
A good way to understand epigenetics is if you have identical twins. If they were to grow up in the same household, they would stay fairly identical. But what happens, one grows up and moves to another vicinity of the world, eats a different diet, is exposed to different environmental toxins, has different life experiences. That one may develop certain diseases that the first one does not develop, even though their genetics are identical. It's the interaction and the expression of their genetics in response to environmental conditions that gives rise to the manifestation of how their life unfolds. And so that's a good way to think of this whole discussion of methylation. It's all about your life choices, and what methylation does, the theory of methylation, is it gives you some insight into the mechanics of what's going on under the hood so that you can start to make better choices and more personalized choices that help you achieve a better homeostasis with your environment. Because very often mental illness arises out of I'm just going to call it a perturbation, either of family life, of a marriage, of a work situation, some major stress combined with poor diet, combined with environmental toxicities, combined with medications. There's all kinds of reasons why people can become mentally ill. And the notion that you can just take a simple chemical, a drug chemical, to treat that symptom of depression, I think is very inadequate for dealing with the fact that the true way to deal with depression is to look at the big picture and to also understand that depression is a symptom. It's not a disease. And so learning how you can better strengthen yourself, arm yourself with better health, helps you become more resilient to the effects of stress and whatnot in your life.
A really interesting epigenetic study that they did was they had people exercise one half of their body. So you've got identical, set of, it's one person. And they took a biopsy, and the side that they exercised, it wasn't even a long period, maybe 2 months, the epigenetic expression of their DNA had changed on the side that they exercised versus the side that they didn't. So everything that we're doing, our body is learning to adapt to that environment. So it's a sensitive system.
Okay, in the 70s, our father, we had a sister and a niece that committed suicide. 5 years ago, my son went through traumatic experiences, and he tried to commit suicide. And the psychiatrist that he was going to, I happened to be able to go with him to one of these meetings, and he looked at us and he says, "There's the problem. It's the mutation of MTHFR."
MTHFR.
Yes. And so he looked at me and he says, "Mother, you have that too, probably." So when I got back home, I did have a test taken, and I do have it. Another sister has it that I can talk into this. But so I've been trying to study this for 5 years, and of course it's so overwhelming to me. Seeking Health is where I get some of my nutrients, but Dr. Ben Lynch is the one place that I first got on and tried to learn about it. It's starting to come to me more. This has really helped me to understand it more.
Good.
And
good.
so
I'm
you
glad.
do have to where we can bring my son in and he can be tested or going through.
Yeah, so this is just an introduction. And so it'd be like Introduction to Neurochemistry 101. And it doesn't mean that you can just go out there and just suddenly start to use it, because both Ann and I have worked a lot in the last 2 to 3 years since we've attended that conference on epigenetics, and we're applying it. And in some ways, it's been rewarding to me because I really see what Dr. Riordan was trying to do. He didn't have the full picture either. We probably don't have the full picture either. Each one of us is striving to figure out what is our ideal way of adapting to our lives and to the stressors in our lives. And so keep in mind, though, that genetics does not mean that that is destiny. Genetics does not equate to destiny. It has to do with how you interact with your genetics personally, because there's a lot of personal choices that you make, how you interact spiritually, how you interact emotionally, how you, the help you get. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. And in many ways, the thing I like about the methylation concept is it gives us a lot more entry points in what to do. Because a lot of people, when they feel depressed, they feel helpless. And so that sense of learned helplessness is probably the worst part of serious depression. But once you realize that there's a lot of inputs to depression, your digestive system, detoxification, cognitive retraining, spiritual support, all of these things can be ways to deal with depression, and you start to see depression as a signal rather than as a diagnosis. Diagnosis sounds like it's, boy, you've got this. No, you're just, your body's giving you a signal that you need to do something different. And here we now see there's lots of different ways to approach this. And we're not against the medication. The medication approach may be the appropriate way initially. It's just that long-term medication is being shown not to be the best answer. So use it short-term, but think about what you can do in terms of correcting the root causes of why you're having maybe chronic depression or chronic anxiety. Yes, sir.
Can you give another example? You used the term that depression is a symptom, not a disease. To help me understand that more, can you give an example of something else that you would think has been characterized as a disease but is actually a symptom or set of symptoms?
Well, this is happening all over the place now. There's a tendency to want to call, what did I heard recently there's a new disease, and it's called election anxiety syndrome. And it's, I thought they were kidding, but really there are people that really this election, we can joke about it, but there was a lot of anger and a lot of emotions that came out.
They probably have high Pyrrols.
They probably, yeah. If they didn't before, they do now. Because stress will deplete nutrient levels. So I think you can give names to constellations of symptoms. You can call them a disease. But I think a more powerful way and a more effective way for the individual is to start asking, well, what is underneath that diagnosis? I'm not opposed to giving something a diagnostic title, but a lot of people suffer from what I call labelitis. They say, oh, I've got this or I've got that, and again, they feel disempowered. And to me, looking for root causes and learning how to correct those root causes is empowering. It's going to help you gain strength and functionality faster than just suppressing the symptom.
Would it be accurate to characterize it, for instance, you have a fever. Fever is not the disease, fever is the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we're discussing.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes.
What is the cost of the tests you suggest?
It's in the health,
Right
and the methylation panel itself is actually on special this month, and so to test all of those nutrients that were listed, it's actually on special, and so I don't know what the exact
It's like
price
the
is, but
third or fourth
our lab
page.
is actually
Yeah.
an open lab, so you can have it tested without having a doctor, but we recommend doing this with the help of a doctor, just because. Like we said, you can shift things out of balance pretty quickly and pretty easily if you're not careful.
What about the N23 year?
The 23andMe you can do on your own. If you go online, it's a .com website. You can order the kit. They'll send it to you. You collect your saliva, punch the preservative down into the solution, and tighten the lid and put it back in the mailer and send it to them, and you'll get your results.
I think it's about $200.
Yeah, about $200. So, but again, you have to find out if you can find. Not all of the, a lot of the doctors. I mean, I'm a family physician, and there's actually some big changes I think coming ahead of us in terms of how medicine is practiced. There's getting to be a scarcity of doctors. Doctors are busy. They don't have time to spend a lot of time, and so consequently, this type of approach probably depends upon someone who's willing to get to know you and you to get to know them, and that's why Dr. Riordan came up with the term co-learners. This is a discovery process. It's not a protocol. It's not an algorithm. It's more about where are you at now in your illness? What do you want to do? How do we want to approach it? And so this is a very good introduction to how we approach mental illness at the Reardon Clinic. So we're being very objective about nutrient levels and maybe genetic factors, but then there's that whole range of how this is a very personal experience. All of us, when we go through any kind of stress or anxiety or depression, it's a very personal experience. And it's not something that we're fixing. It's really helping you to understand the symptoms and understanding your strengths and weaknesses and where you can make things better. And then as you start to make things better, you get stronger, and your ability to cope with the situations that are giving rise to the depression, you become more effective. And so that, to me, is the real power of the Reardon approach in this area. Yes.
If a person is on a medication for depression, do they have to go off of it to have an accurate test?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, you do not have. Matter of fact, I always tell people, don't go off your medicine. There's some real dangers about coming off of psychotropic medicines rapidly, and if we're going to do any reduction, it has to be done in a controlled way. And so we would always have you work with your regular doctor. So we're not, and it won't affect the tests. The tests are going to be what they are. So that's not a big problem. Okay, if anyone has to go, we've done our time, and so I want to thank all of you that were attended. So, but we'll take a few more questions here.
What's a Pyrrol?
So,
Go ahead, Ann. Yeah.
so a Pyrrol is something that it's a product that's produced in the body. It's a chemical that's produced in the body, and certain people have a tendency of producing more of it than others. And I don't think we know exactly the mechanism of why certain people do, or not, but the people that tend to produce more Pyrrols and excrete more Pyrrols in their urine tend to have those symptoms that we talked about with the urinary Pyrrol depression. And so it's, like I said, it tends to run in families, but it's a chemical compound that the body produces when it's under stress.
Think of it as a biomarker. So we use it as a biomarker. There's a whole chemistry behind it, but that's not, I don't think, important to this group. So, and yes, sir.
Do you see cases of people being able to taper off SSRIs with application of this?
Yes, but again, I have learned the hard way not to take people off too fast, because there is a withdrawal. In psychiatry, they call it discontinuation syndrome. And because your medicines do affect the neurotransmitters, your brain is never standing still. It's trying to adapt, and one of the ways that it adapts is that it'll either make more or less of the docking points for these neuroreceptors. And so if you suddenly stop your medicine, you can get a lot worse fast. And so the idea is to discontinue based upon strength, not based upon the desire. I want to get off this medicine. That's not good enough. You want to create a foundation of better health, better biochemistry, better methylation, and then on that basis you can taper slowly, and your body will, once again, your brain has what they call neuroplasticity. It'll adapt to being off the medicine. But if you've been on it for a long time, it's a big mistake to come off fast. So.
Can you define a long time?
I think that's where the biochemical individuality comes on. If you've been on them for a long time, it's going to take longer to come off. If you've been on them for a short time, you can get off them quicker.
Is a year a long time?
No,
One rule of thumb is for every month you've been off of it, it takes about 2 months to get off of it. So
every month you've been on it.
Sorry, every month you've been on it, it takes about a month to get off of it. So if you've been on it a year, it'll take about a year to get off of it.
Right. Yeah, it's just better to think slow in that regard. And really, this approach is not a fast approach either. If you really think about what we've said here today, we're wanting you to look at your diet, your sleep habits, just about everything comes into play in terms of health enhancement. This is the radical shift that I think is occurring now in the minds of a lot of physicians, is that, gee, it makes more sense to help patients learn how to create better health rather than to fix these little individual problems. But yet, you do have to look at the individual problems, and what's nice about methylation is it gives us a kind of structure that helps us understand where we can start applying scientific nutritional knowledge to making your brain and your chemistry work better. Hey, thank you, everyone. I think we're about done here. I want to just thank you all very much for one quick question here. Yeah, we do that here. Not that I know of. We basically sat down several months ago, and I've been thinking about this for about a year, like, wait a minute, we've done these tests. We've done these tests for 40-some years now. Dr. Riordan did it from the very beginning. What the methylation theory does is it kind of shows us which of the nutrient levels that we test for. We test for 40 or 50 different nutrient levels. But these are the ones that relate specifically to mental health issues. But thank you, everyone, for coming today, and we'll hang around if you have any other questions for us. Thank you.